As a neuroscience PhD candidate by day, independent artist by night, Mikey thrives in the in-between, putting him in a unique position that builds bridges that connects the brain and the heart. He's been featured on CBC Radio, TEDx, international scientific conferences, and at his home institution, the University of British Columbia, as a Sessional Lecturer in psychology. He's also now on our newest series, Sound of Music, on CBC's Creator Network. Mikey, welcome to ThinkSpace.
Thanks for having me, Summan. Happy to be here.
Of course. Okay, so I have to tell this little story because it's like a glimmer story for me. So as you know, Self-Hired, we produce a lot of Music BC's content. And for anybody who doesn't know, Music BC is a organization that supports artist development here in BC. Mm-hmm. So we're on site for a music camp, and I met you at the campfire.
Yeah.
And it was the moment where my idea, you know, when your friends believe in your idea, but then when a stranger is like, yo, that idea has legs, you know?
Yeah.
So I was talking to you.
I remember this moment too.
Do
exactly.
you?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I was talking to you inside the gazebo, and I was telling you how I really want to do content about do a mini doc series on how music and the brain impact each other and how it impacts our memories, our emotions. And you go to me and you're like, yeah, that's actually what I'm going to be doing for a living.
Yeah. I remember that so clearly because at the time I was starting my PhD journey.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to talk about music and science as much as possible. That was like a music camp, right? It was like the camp rock of music development here in BC. And obviously there was a focus on music development and you're developing your career. And then having you out of the blue talk about, you know, the healing aspect or the scientific aspect of music, I was like, I love that idea. There's something here, and let's maybe circle back to this at some point and actually make it happen. And it seems like that actually came to fruition.
I know, really cool. 4 years later, but that's the thing. You have to stay true to your dreams and stay true to your ideas because ideas come. You never know when the idea is ready for the universe to receive the idea. But anyways, so I am very pumped to have you here today. I feel like I've already learned so much from you. I was saying when you walked in here, I've been seeing a lot of you because we're in the editing bay and we're editing right now. But by the time this podcast comes out, the series will be out. So question to you. First, how was it being interviewed for The Feelings of Music?
It was an amalgamation of all the things that I love to talk about, the things that keep me up at night and keep my brain running kind of in the background all the time, is talking about music and talking about its impact on our emotions, its impact on, in medicine and in the healthcare system. That's kind of untapped, I think. And so when you tapped my shoulder, you and Kevin tapped my shoulder to talk about this through this docuseries, I was of course I was on board. I'm so passionate about talking about this type of thing. And I think it's still pretty underrated. I mean, music has been used as a tool for medicine and for making us feel good for thousands and thousands of years. So it's not underrated in that aspect, but its conversations in science and in medicine, I think, are still seen as this is art and it's not science. And I think validating art with science is a really powerful thing. So I'm all on board with that. Yeah.
Can you talk to me about that impetus moment where you started to validate that for yourself? Where did this inquiry come from?
I feel like my entire life has always been science informing art, art informing science. It's really interesting. And people call it, the left and the right brain talking to each other. I've always felt that was true. From an early age, I just loved music. I loved writing music, loved creating music. And so the creative part, I would say, probably came first. It's kind of one of those chicken egg things. It's hard to say. But I would say that what is intuitive to me is creating art, is creating music. So I started writing music when I was really young. I mean, writing music, again, really simple songs.
Today I went to the corner store.
No, truly.
I got a freezie.
Yeah, really simple lyrics that kind of are goofy. But I started writing when I was maybe 7 or 8, cool. Really young. As soon as I started learning to form paragraphs, I started learning how to formulate songs in a very simple way.
Were you encouraged
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah?
I come from a family. Neither of my parents are music professionals, but they grew up in the Philippines putting on musicals as fundraisers.
Cool.
So they would use music as a medium to raise funds for their communities, for local and global charities. And so that is actually something that carried on. So that is actually where I started to think about the power of music in a tangible way. Because when they immigrated here, and as my sister and I were growing up, my sister is like 5 years older than I am, we as a family started to continued that legacy. We started to create and write musicals together as a means to raise funds for local and global charities. So whatever my parents did in the Philippines, we carried that over to here. And the first musical that we wrote together, I was like in high school. I was like 15. My sister was in university. We wrote that musical. My sister and I wrote 15 original songs for that musical.
Insane.
And I didn't know what I was really doing. I just knew that music, again, I really liked to make music and write music. And it was something I was passionate about. But through that process, over 5 or 6 years, we put on this musical. We raised $250,000 for local and global charities through that musical.
Dude, crazy.
I'm so proud of it.
15 years old?
Yeah, I was 15.
Wow.
I was, it was a weird era of my life where being a musician wasn't really that cool, or like being in musical theater.
Oh
wasn't
yeah,
really
back in the day when we were kids, like it was like you're the nerd.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm trying to get back around. Like I try to reject the whole musical theater kid label, but I mean, hey, I'm theatrical. It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so those were very formative years. And the interesting part, the thing that came out of that experience was these questions that kept coming back into my mind. How are we creating this impact through music? I was not a neuroscientist at the time. I didn't know how people's emotions were being triggered or changed, or why people were moved to tears with music that my sister and I had written for this project. And I kept going back to this question, like, how are we doing this? What is happening? Is there something special here and in the music that moves me to tears, or makes me laugh, or makes me cry, or makes me angry? What are the properties of music? What's happening in my brain that's actually allowing me to experience music in this way? So I started asking these questions. In my undergrad, I started to use the scientific method to try to approach and answer these questions. And then it turns out that when you do a PhD, it's just like you're kind of keeping on asking and trying to answer these questions, and going deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. And here we are, still asking these questions. So it's a long-winded answer, but basically they've always informed each other. The music and the science, and really came to fruition by just asking these natural questions that we ask ourselves every day.
Yeah, I know a few PhDers, and I feel like there's one of two types, like the PhD person who can come to a conclusion, like this is where I'm concluding today, and the PhD type who can't come to a conclusion. Yeah, and I'm just like, bro, that must be tough in the mind.
That's the crux of being a PhD student, or just being in academia, is like one question leads to 10 million other questions, which leads to 10 million. It's just this branching tree of questions, and you can keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And that is torturous sometimes. Like just last night, I was working on this review paper that I'm working on for my thesis, and reading one paper gave me like 12 different ideas, and then that gave me 12 other ideas, and I'm like, well, I only have this limited amount of time.
So I have to make a decision.
To answer the questions that are most important. So it is quite torturous, but that's the game.
That's the game. Yeah. And that's something I actually really appreciated about your interview that you did in the series, was I felt like there were parts where you're like, well, I could answer this in like 5 ways, but here's what I'm going to say based on what I know now. Right. And I really appreciated that. Before when we were talking offline, we were talking about Bridgerton, and love. Did you end up watching the Crown? The Queen,
Queen Charlotte.
Yes. Did you? Okay. So the end.
This
scene,
is me putting myself on blast here. Huge thank you, Shondaland.
Incredible. But she's so good. My girlfriend says she uses formulas, and I think that's why she's such a great storyteller. She takes a formula and she just fucking runs with it. Yeah. But this is a spoiler for anybody who hasn't watched it, but you know the end scene where Queen Charlotte comes and she's telling the king that their line is going to extend, right? And then he's not understanding her, so she goes under the bed.
I was just talking about this.
Were
scene.
you?
Yes.
Okay, so divinely guided, dude. I sobbed like a way I have not cried in a long time. Like my heart was in my, like, oh my God, it was insane. But I think because there's all of this like old classical style music, and then you're playing songs like Taylor Swift or like melodies that we know. So you can take this experience that this woman is having that none of us understand, right? But then we do understand loving somebody. You know what I mean? We do understand wanting somebody to see us. We do understand wanting to share an experience. And that moment was just like,
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to shout out a local composer / strings arranger, Caleb Chan, who actually has his compositions or his arrangements of those things in Bridgerton.
No way!
Yeah, and he's from the city. So,
dude, that's so dope.
Yeah, so shout out to him. He did the Bad Idea cover just for this last season.
Yeah.
This was like the pinnacle of like the Be My Mistress moment.
Yeah,
it was like that was he was like the background strings for that. And that I've been wanting to talk about this because there is something about that, about using familiar songs that already have some kind of emotional connection to it, but then flipping it and making it a part of this world, right? Like if you were just to put or insert Olivia Rodrigo's, for instance, Olivia Rodrigo's Bad Idea in the Bridgerton world, it would seem out of place.
Yeah.
The words are there, the sentiment is there, the melodies are there, but the instrumentation doesn't fit the world.
Yeah.
So now we have something that is now Bridgertonized, I guess is the term. And you put something that's just like plucky strings and with it's the same melodies, it's the same everything, but it's just a different arrangement. And now you buy it. It's kind of in the world of that you set in for instance, in Bridgerton. And so these emotional feelings, like from the Queen Charlotte example to, this past season of Bridgerton, you can feel the emotional state because it feels congruent with the scene that you're watching. And the thing that I love, that one of the first things I loved about music and emotion is in film, is that you can have something in the background or something that can maybe take more of a character, more of a center stage, spot in a film, and depending on how that's portrayed, your entire emotional state, how you perceive the scene, completely changes based on the music.
Yeah.
Like if you've ever tried to, like that scene of the queen and the king under the bed, and there's this like heartstrings, like it's like really lush, beautiful music that's being played in the background. If you change that to something that's more sinister or something that's like creepy, there's like maybe horror violins behind it, all of a sudden you're like underneath the bed, it's dark. It's like you have a different interpretation of what it could mean.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I nerd about that all the time is like music plays a central character in film and in television and all the things that we love to consume because it like changes the context completely.
So for anybody on the other side who doesn't know and understand the bridge between music and your brain, first of all, can you just bring us up to speed? Like, what do we need to know and understand about the brain, and how does music impact our brains?
Well, the wonderful thing is that music impacts our entire brain. Music is one of the only types of stimuli that we witness that actually impacts our entire brain, that lights up our entire brain. When we're listening to music, it lights up certain parts of the brain, like our reward systems, our emotion systems, our emotion centers of our brain. But when we're actually engaging with music, when we're playing music with each other, when we're singing together in a choir or even a drum circle, we're engaging motor areas. We're coordinating our external stimuli with our internal states, which is really regulated by the brain. So if there's something that you need to know, if the basic thing that people need to know about our brains and music is they feel very intertwined, is something that our brains kind of readily accept. Whether you like music or you don't like music, sound in general is something that is somewhat primitive in terms of our response to it.
Yeah, that primitive nature, right? Because when you're talking about fear, right, there's this Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just so innate. Why is it so innate?
Well, that was those areas of the brain we call these like primitive structures in our brain, like the deepest structures in our brain, like the amygdala, like our the scientific terms for these areas of our brain, like the striatum, the limbic system. Those are kind of like our fight or flight or flee or freeze response, right? When we had nothing else, when we didn't have to think so hard about, the complexity of the modern world, when we were Neanderthals, we were just trying not to die out here in these streets. We were just trying to like not get eaten or not get killed or like be it within tribes and relate to people.
Yeah.
So these primitive structures that are still in our brains are in survival mode sometimes. That's why we have things like anxiety disorders where our brains don't necessarily know that not everything is a threat in our day-to-day lives today. It might have been in the past. It might have been when again, thousands and thousands of years ago. But now we're kind of dealing with different types of threats. And so our emotional spectrum is, I would argue, a lot more minute, and it's like a lot more specific these days. But yeah, like being fearful is one of those like primitive responses that we have because we were just trying to live out here.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. That's something I think about a lot is historical stuff, like things that live within our bodies and our systems that are historical. So like, let's say it's something that my grandma lived through, but I never lived through. And even what you're saying is that was centuries ago, right?
Yeah,
So it's why do we still feel like that?
So there's interesting research that's being done in animal models actually about this. We have this idea of intergenerational or transgenerational trauma, where it's like these traumatic moments, especially when we're young people, actually can change our what we call epigenetics. Epigenetics is just the combination of our genes and our environment interacting with each other. And everybody has those two pieces that are interacting with each other. When we think nature versus nurture, that's epigenetics is kind of like it's both. It's like them interacting. So this idea of things like traumatic events that can go from one generation to another generation, that is actually being validated and seen on a biological level in animal studies. Like they will actually cause some kind of stress or extreme stress in young rats and in pregnant rats with babies inside of these pregnant rats, and then actually follow the epigenetic changes over time. And they will actually see that it actually does change the genetics. So there is something real about it. We talk about intergenerational trauma as kind of like a buzzy thing and something that we know as human beings probably exist.
Yeah.
But it's biologically being validated.
Yeah. When my mom was pregnant with me, she was very stressed. And one of the things that she would do to find less stress, I guess, at the time was like go to places like Sears or the Bay. And when I'm stressed now, sometimes I just want to go to a department store. And I know that's so weird, but like something about just like walking in these like large third spaces calms me down and chills me the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to also just, classical conditioning and operant conditioning, like the idea that what we learn and what we see, and also observational learning, what we see from our parents, our grandparents, those patterns, we also recognize that within ourselves. So, maybe that's going to the Bay to calm yourself down or make you feel a little bit peaceful. Some people, that's why people have like retail therapy. They will shop because that makes them feel peaceful. Some people will listen to music because that's what makes them feel peaceful. Some cues and like things in the environment are naturally, I think, inclined to changing our emotional state, like something like music. And others we kind of just create associations with because that's what we've noticed, that's what we've seen.
Or that's what we've just learned.
And that's what we've learned, exactly. Like we go to these places or do these activities and that's what calms us down or that's what brings us back to earth. And that might be different than somebody else's, and that is just based on our own experiences and strengthening those neural connections in our brain. Yeah.
Okay, so the nervous system is the new buzzy word everywhere.
Oh, of course,
right?
Yeah.
What is the nervous system?
I'm getting flashbacks from our
Like,
docuseries.
Summan, I need a break.
Yeah, you're like, well, we can answer this 5,000 different ways.
Yeah, but you know what's crazy is before our interview. So as you know, I do coaching, right?
Yeah.
And so I do a lot of IFS therapy, internal family systems, for coaching, and then I know a lot about this space, not necessarily maybe in the exact same way that you do, but I was telling a friend coach of mine, and I was like, sometimes when I feel like I have to explain the nervous system, I like want to poop my pants. I was like, ugh, what is it?
It's like, that's the thing, is it does everything. Like,
it does everything.
It's truly, it's the thing that, I would argue it's the thing that controls everything, right?
Yeah.
Our brains, but also like our peripheral nervous system too. Like, it allows us to take information from the world, it processes it in some way, and then something comes out. Like we interact with the world in a particular type of way. This conversation is a byproduct of our nervous system. We are regulating ourselves constantly by our nervous system. Sometimes our nervous system is so out of whack that it can't be regulated, and then that's what gives us distress. So it's really like, that's why it's so hard to answer that question, because the nervous system really is like the central, like the man in the chair. Like, it's like the thing that controls everything. Yeah.
So, okay, that regulation part, right?
Yeah.
What does it mean to regulate your nervous system?
So our bodies naturally and our brains naturally regulate itself through a process called homeostasis.
And what does regulate mean?
Regulate is just balance, right? It's this internal state of balance. It's like, we regulate ourselves in a room. If it's too hot, we turn up the AC. If it's too cold, we turn it down. If you're like me, I'm very poor regulator in my car. I will like blast the heater on when I think it's too cold, and then in 2 seconds it's too hot, and I'll blast it the other way.
Yep.
It's nice to know that our bodies are a little bit more nuanced in its approach, but our body naturally tries to find that balance, right? When our body can't find that balance in itself, then our central nervous system kicks in. We kind of find other ways to balance that out, right? So,
and what informs that? I think that's what's something that's very interesting or where I think a lot of people find a lot of interest in it right now, is what is informing dysregulation or regulation. And that's, like, from what I understand, is very individual, but there's a baseline of, hey, maybe this out of 10 people, this is going to help 8, but it's still very individual. Yeah,
it is very individual. I would say that for the most part in neurotypical individuals, this balance is kind of a natural thing. Like, we don't necessarily think about the decisions that we make that helps us regulate ourselves, but it just happens. Like when, our body knows that when we're in a fever state, like when we're running up a fever, we start shivering because we're trying to regulate our body so that it actually, normalizes our body's temperature, right? We're like overheating, so we're trying to like compensate in some ways. So there's some things that are naturally things that happen to us that we just do. But other times it's just, again, based on our experiences. We don't want to be in an uncomfortable position unless we choose to be in an uncomfortable position, right? I did watch or listen to another one of the podcasts, the ThinkSpace podcast episodes of the guy who did an Ironman on every continent, which I thought was such an amazing, first of all, incredible feat, but just the conversations that you were having as well. In those settings, we are putting our body in a particular state that is uncomfortable, and we know that it's uncomfortable. And it's like our central nervous system, our brain, is like overriding all the pain and all the agony that our body's feeling. And we can do that. But naturally, our body's like, if we're running a marathon and then we have to swim and then we have to, our brains are like screaming at us to not do that.
So how does somebody like Connor do that?
Well, it's this idea of like mind over matter, right? Like it's a strong central nervous system. You have as evolved human beings, we have our prefrontal cortex that tells us, kind of like gives us like the logical approach to things. It helps us to reason. It helps us to problem solve. That part of our brain can tell us, okay, logically speaking, we got to stop. This is not good for us. This is probably going to hurt us. But that same part of our brain can be like, no, we've trained for this. This is something that we've approached and tried to
I'm capable
accomplish for a long time. And you're like, I'm capable of doing this. And so you can override kind of like other, other feelings of trying to balance yourself out. But again, it's very individual. It very much depends on each individual person. I'm trying not to get too into the weeds of like this whole conversation because for each individual person, there is even like a difference in our baseline like motivational state. Like a lot of my thesis work looks into our reward systems and how that actually is, informs what actually gives us that wanting effect. Like,
tell me more about that because there's this story, and tell me if I'm on the right ball here. But there's this story of these two Iranian women. They left a war zone. They came to New York, and they're twins. And, they start living life in America. One ends up becoming like, okay, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And she ends up becoming a doctor and has a very fortunate, blessed life. And then the other one just could not figure out how to get past herself, right? And that is just a highlighted experience of, okay, let's say we're siblings or let's say we're friends and we all come from quote unquote similar circumstances. And I like to use the example of like siblings, right? Because we all come from the same house and maybe we had the same challenges, but really we didn't have the same challenges. Yeah.
I mean, the only way to actually, one of the only ways to actually parse out the nature and nurture of things is through twin studies. So researchers will find twins, like identical twins, right? Because the idea is that identical twins share 100% of the same genetics, barring, particular mutations or something, but they have the same genetics. So if you actually get two identical twins that were raised together versus raised apart, then you can say, okay, well, this is because of genetics, because they have the same genetics, or this is probably due to some kind of environmental change. Siblings actually are the same as dizygotic twins or fraternal twins, right? Share about 50% of the same genetics. So really, there's a lot of room to play with if you're even talking about the same household and the same parents. Like there's a lot of differences within your genetic pool and also within your experiences. So it's really tough to say, like two siblings who came from the same family might have completely different experiences or ways of approaching life, almost as if, they were, I wouldn't say like unrelated, but it's really, it's not as close as like two identical twins. Yeah. So it's really interesting.
Even birth order must have impact that.
There's some interesting work on birth order. There's not a lot of validation of birth order in like a biological sense that it actually impacts, but in a sociological sense, like if you're actually talking about the responsibilities that the eldest versus the youngest takes on, there is a lot of things to talk about that. Like even my sister and I talk a lot about that. She always feels like as the eldest, she had to take a lot of responsibility and take that role seriously, and she's more of a type A person and I'm more of a type B. It's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but
dude, my baby brother, I will never forget. And so many of my guy friends were like, "Oh, he didn't want to tell you where he's going." I was like, "No, trust me, he would have just told me where he's going." I'm driving him to the SkyTrain. I was like, "Where are you guys going today?" He's like, "I don't know." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna get on the SkyTrain. We'll figure it out." Yeah, I would never do. I'm the oldest, and I was like, I would never do that.
It is a really interesting dynamic. Like, and also I think it's a cultural thing as well too, right? Like, I've been talking about these kind of like birth order effects and dynamics with other, for people from different cultural backgrounds, and it seems like again, generalization. This is not scientifically based, but people of color, and people who are children of immigrants, that birth order effect seems to be a little bit more prominent, just in my experiences. Just because moving from one place to another and then having to take on a role that is more like usually more mature for their age is something that is not a strange phenomenon for people of color, like first or second generation immigrants. I was born here. My sister was born in the Philippines. They might immigrated here. So she took a lot of that responsibility, and still takes that responsibility growing up. She feels like, she the power of everyone's happiness is in her hands. I'm not sure if you relate to this. And I'm like, let people be whatever, let people be people, let them decide whatever. And she's like, no, I don't know. That's just like an interesting aside to this conversation.
No, I totally get it. I think that there are things that I feel that about, but I think my personality maybe overrides a little bit of the birth order for me, because also like me and my family, everyone's an alpha. And it's very interesting. Like my brothers are very like, we are who we are and we're individuals this way. And then I'm very like that. And my mom's very like that. My parents aren't together. And so I feel like my family uniquely functions more like a team rather than like this like versus when I was younger, before my parents split up, that was very prevalent. Yeah.
I fully relate to that. I think I would say that my family and I also operate like a team in that sense. Like when we were writing the musical together, people asked me before, like, how did you write with your family? What was that experience like? And I'm like, we are just constantly yelling at each other. Like, basically. We're constantly just trying to yell and fight for our ideas to be heard. And then at the end of the day, there is this beautiful amalgamation of all of our ideas that come to the table, and like, the best idea wins kind of thing. But there is something interesting, which is why it's not as simple as like birth order effect or genetics. It's like all of these different facets and combinations of things like personality, things in our lives that actually culminate into what the dynamic is. Like every single dynamic is such a unique and interesting one, because everybody's different. Everybody brings something else to the table. So
yeah. That's why I'm like not a big fan of blanket statements, especially when it comes to mental health or well-being. Like anytime I have a client who sits in my chair and is like, all right, like this is what's been happening in my life, I'm always way more curious about what is your individual experience, because if I put perception onto you, there might be trends, as of course there are, but if I put my own perceptions on you, then or what I think it typically is for people, then I'm also missing you. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I would say that the most effective, again, I'm not a therapist, I'm a neuroscientist, but in training. But the idea that I think is really important is like each individual person, there might be universal experiences. There's also the flip side where everybody, there's this saying where it's like, I've never had an original thought in my life, where that's also true, right? Like a lot of people sometimes feel isolated in how they feel. And it's nice to know that there are certain prototypes of emotional, emotional arcs that are typical. But you're completely right in that if we are wanting to heal ourselves, we do have to take kind of an individualized approach. That's why, group therapy is one way of going through something, but individualized therapy is much more prominent in that sense, or at least effective in an individual standpoint, because the way that you feel about the same issue or the same thing that you're trying to deal with is very different from somebody else's who might be facing the exact same issue. So I would agree with you on that.
Yeah. Okay, bringing it back to music a little bit. Yeah. So, you were always interested in this relationship between neuroscience and music, but you did, take that venture and became an artist, and you're a very good artist. So how has my question is, how has your tenacity grown as an artist over time to keep putting yourself out there?
Oh, great question. I would say that as an artist, I've been thinking a lot about the parallels of being a PhD student and an independent artist. And you would actually maybe people would be surprised to know that there's a lot of similarities in those streams. As an independent artist, you're like your own label, your own funder. You apply for grants. You're your own, most of the time, your own manager, your own creative director. You work with people. You try to you find team members who can facilitate and try to grow that dream with you. But you're kind of like doing it on your own. Like you don't have an engine behind it.
Yeah, you're the leader.
You're the leader. Yeah. As a PhD student, most of the time, in my case, I'm my own study coordinator. I'm doing my own ethics. I'm running my own participants. I have, again, a team around me, like great work-learn students and research assistants and the bigger lab around me. But if I'm not moving, then the project isn't moving. So it's really interesting going through these parallel journeys of being an independent artist and also a PhD student is if I'm not moving my ass, nobody is going to make these things work or make it to the finish line. And so I think when you're
How
talking
did you
about
learn that?
How did I learn about?
Well, the fact that nobody else is going to do it for
Well,
you.
you learn it because you learn it. You get support in certain ways, but it's like if I have, we were talking about this off camera, but like I'm a very all or nothing type of person, and I'm trying to find a way to navigate that. But I'm always either like full throttle or I stop, and I can't bring myself to do something, or I get fatigued or I get burnt out or something like that. When I stopped, I have this very overwhelming feeling that like nothing is going to move it forward. So I have to try to find ways of getting past that and working past those moments so that I can get back on the ball. So it's been really interesting when you're talking about finding the tenacity and finding the, whatever that is, the energy, the motivation to just go for it. It's just, I think going through those little cracks and breaks every single time where it's like, I guess it's just me out here. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of support. I couldn't do anything without my support around me. But at the end of the day, my support around me isn't going to write my thesis. It's not going to write my debut album.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I have to do that. And I have to have the tenacity to just go for it, because that's in my heart's desire. Like, I would feel way worse if I didn't do it.
Let's talk about that
yeah.
in my heart's desire.
Yeah.
So how has music shown up in your heart's desire?
Music, I feel like, has been my first heart's desire in many ways. My mom tells me this anecdote before I was even conscious as a little tyke, that my sister was taking piano lessons at the time. She was about 8 or 9 years old, and she was playing Ode to Joy on the piano. And then later on, my mom hears it, and it's like played really well. And she was like, wow, Trisha's learning a lot. She's doing great. And then she goes over to the piano, and I'm the one who's playing it. I like listened to my sister playing it, and then I like copied it down.
Wow.
And again, don't remember this happening, but I think innately there's something, and something I can't really explain, but music has always been something that I've been able to connect with. And I describe it to people as it's something that my body needs. If I stopped, writing music, or if I stopped singing, or if I stopped expressing myself in this way, I feel like a part of me would have died, or really does not exist, because it's the way that I connect with the world, I connect with people, and it's just so fundamental to me that like I could never get rid of it, even if I wanted to.
Yeah. How have you fostered that outside? Because there's the part of you that's creating, right? To create, like, let's say that debut album.
Yeah.
And then what I'm hearing, though, is also that part of you that needs to create to breathe.
Yeah.
So how are you fostering that in like your day-to-day life? Because you're busy.
Yes. This is the thing is, I found that if I kind of pursue something fully, and this is from in my experience, if I fully pursue one thing, then I will then start to treat that thing like it's a 9-to-5 job, and then I'll start hating it. And so people are like, how do you balance the music and the PhD? How are you doing both of those things? Honestly, I think that's the only way that I can make it work for me, because doing one thing is kind of rest from the other thing. When I'm spending time writing music, it's always, I can't afford for it to be a bad time. It has to be intentional. It has to feel good. And if it doesn't feel good, then it's a waste of time and I won't do it. Same thing with a PhD. Like if, there's moments where I really am driven up the wall because it's a hard thing. It's a really hard thing to finish and to actually pursue. But at the end of the day, like I'm so driven by these questions that it's the thing that again, when I wake up in the morning, this is the thing that I'm thinking about. If I'm tired of it and I don't care about the questions that I'm pursuing in my PhD, I'm not going to do it. I've said time and time again, I would not be pursuing a PhD if the questions I was asking were questions I didn't care about, or if I was just asking questions for the sake of asking questions. And I know a lot of academia, leans into that. And we do need people like that, people who just like to ask questions, who are taking a philosophical, that's the PH part in the D, right? The philosophical doctorate, just ask questions relentlessly. And that's how we find truths. But if I think that if I just kept doing that, then I would also just not be, grounded. And I would kind of, so it's just a balance of those two things. I feel like taking a break from one thing really invigorates me to do the other thing.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people could look at that like competing desires, but to me it sounds like they're two fuel sources.
Yeah, I thought they were competing for a long time. That's the whole, I've made it kind of my mantra is like, I don't want to pick a lane, right? Sometimes you have to weigh more of your time on one thing than the other, but picking a lane to me has this idea of like, you have to let go of one thing in order for you to be really good at another thing. And what I really love about my life and what I get to say I'm privileged to do is to create bridges between the things that I love, is to not necessarily go all into one, put my eggs in a basket, into one basket, and to really create bridges between realms and let people know that there is an in-between in everything, that there's gray areas, that there are, and that's where beautiful conversations, I think, come out of.
Do you think that people have discomfort with gray?
Hey, certainly.
Why? Why do you think so?
I think, from the research world to, I would say if I take a strict research perspective on this, like what's constantly happening in research is you're trying to operationalize your terms. You're saying, this is how I would define it, this is how I would measure it, but it does actually leave a lot of gray area out because you're trying to be so precise in what you measure that you leave some nuance out. To be precise, you have to take out confounding variables, other variables that might muddy the waters up. But life is messy. Life is all about the gray area. And I think by pushing against that gray and by pushing toward these gray areas and having these conversations, it's like, well, it actually isn't like blanket statements. Like you can't blanket statement this entire thing. We have to have a nuanced conversation about it. That's where I think, politically, within the academic world, within the arts world, I think when we are trying to find these in-betweens, that's, I think, where these more nuanced conversations come out. And I think those are really powerful.
Yeah. I think that, we all know and understand the political climate we're living in right now. I think that the ability to have nuanceical conversations and to have discernment are skills that are really, really needed right now. And what I mean by that is, for example, I'm somebody who puts myself out online and I build my business that way. At times I'm really afraid to just say what I think because it's like, oh, well, am I putting it in stone?
Yeah.
Right? But really the way that I operate as an individual is, let's say I think that the sky is blue and you give me some information that makes me realize, oh, maybe it's not blue. But I'm willing to change my mind based off the information that I gain.
Yeah.
And I think so many people are not willing to have conversations with people who do not think exactly like they do.
Yeah.
Because of rigidity or the fear of being able to discern things for themselves, or maybe just not having the skill.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I'm guilty of that as well. I think that the social media platforms and the world that we live in aren't conducive to those types of conversations. It's, the way
it won't win there.
It won't because the algorithms are literally created to cause separation. Like you consume the media that you consume, the media that you consume more, that will keep getting fed to you, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm guilty of that. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to see that. That just makes me feel bad, negative. It's like the opposite side. And it's so important to sometimes just have and consume parts of those things in your feed and have them, not have it all one-sided, because that's when we are blindsided by things that happen. We need to be aware, even if we don't agree with it, of everything that's happening in the world, on every side and every angle. And I don't think that is counter to having a stance. I think that people have this idea, like if you hold a stance, then everything in your life has to be completely aligned with that, including your feeds. And I think that that's harmful more than helpful. I think we can have a stance and we can stand for something and we can support people and stand behind and be allies to people who need it most, especially when people are being disenfranchised and being marginalized. But I think that it would be naive of us to close our eyes to the opposing viewpoints, even if they're completely wrong
crazy.
in our eyes and
exactly.
crazy. It's like you need it because
can I be informed by it, or
exactly.
can I be challenged by it? You know, one of my friends, Kevin, not this Kevin, but another Kevin, he's always like, we would get into these debates, right? And he's just like, you need shit to stand on, Sue. You can't just tell me your position and not have stuff to stand on. And this was years ago.
Yeah.
And it made me really think like, that was a time where I had a lot of like fire in me. You know, when you were, I don't know, like there's, I think, periods of your social justice journey or your journey as an individual where you're just like, you're full of fire and you might not have like the rocks to understand, where is this fire coming from? What is informing this? If I got these 10 objections, could I then say X, right? And the more that you start to build up that, I feel like you can take a stance, but then you're more willing to just be open to life, right? Yeah. This conversation went in a very different direction. Yeah. But it's just one of those things that I've been thinking so much about lately is like how can we encourage ourselves to be more flexible and open in conversations to speak in different types of individuals so that we can learn.
Well, I actually don't think it's it's definitely a departure from our conversation, but I think that it all comes down to this idea of that knowledge is power. Speaking on research, right? I think the most powerful things that research brings to the table is it's informed by evidence. Evidence and facts and whatever information can come from many different sources. And what I always tell my students, I taught research methods course this past term, is always be critical of the information that you're receiving. Where is it coming from? How are they getting to the statistics that they're getting to? How are they positioning these particular facts? Is this a primary source of information or a secondary source of information? I think critical thinking, especially with information in this day and age, is huge and is hugely important.
Yeah.
I think you can be confident in your opinions when you are looking at the source of information and making informed decisions. And then when you have conversations with other people who might bring informed information and decisions from other angles, you can have a conversation that isn't so much what I think it can be, which is like a personal attack. You know, sometimes people have beliefs that are based on emotional states, that are based on their feelings, and they associate that with who they are.
Yeah.
When you are taking a research or scientific approach, you kind of distance the emotional aspect of it and then focus on what the information is saying. Now, that isn't to say that emotion doesn't play a part in these kinds of conversations. I think emotion drives conversations forward. Like the passion that you see from people who are really, feel a strong way about things can come from things like lived experiences and other sources of information that aren't just like numbers in a publication. But I think it's really having more knowledge is power. It allows us to take the reins on what we believe in and allows our brains to be flexible. Like if the facts don't align with our beliefs, we have to update our beliefs.
Yeah.
Or else we are just, living
on old programming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're not growing as people.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there something, because you said if I'm not interested in the questions that I'm asking, then I don't want to ask these questions. Are there questions that you've asked in your research? Are there findings that you've had that you're like, whoa, I was surprised by that? Or I felt very confirmed by that?
Yes. Yeah. So right now I'm in the process of doing a lot of the analysis from the data that we've collected. And anecdotally, I can share that there are a lot of things that have been very validating, as well as things that were surprising. So I work with people with Parkinson's. That's the main population that I work with. And on the surprising side of things, like on the clinical side of things, I was surprised to know, and I shouldn't really have been, is that there's the population of people with Parkinson's is very heterogeneous. There are a lot of different, places that people with Parkinson's come from. And it's not just like you have Parkinson's, therefore we're blanketing you with, again, the same type of, motor symptoms or like the same affect. People I know who I've worked with in the study are incredible athletes. They like work out more than I do. And I I'm would like to think that I keep active and try to do that consistently. And some participants have previously, been doctors or previously have lived in 5 different countries and bring these experiences with them. When I came into the study with the label of I'm working with people with Parkinson's, it's so often that we center our focus on, we're helping these people or we're treating these people. Whereas at the end of the day, especially for a study like mine where we're exposing them to music and podcasts and different types of audio, it's really forming a connection and allowing their own experiences to inform how they react or respond to the intervention. So that was really surprising for me at first, but now more so, it allows me to understand, like, again, looking at the power of music, looking at the power of spoken word podcasts, how that interacts with each individual is very different. Things that have been validating is, seeing the response that people have to different types of audio, specifically music. There was one gentleman who I had an interview with, and we basically play 15-second excerpts of songs. We don't have we don't have a lot of time to go through their favorite songs or favorite music, but there was a 15-second excerpt of the song Yesterday by the Beatles.
Okay.
One of my favorite songs of all time.
Yeah. Within
this 15-second excerpt, in my mind, I was like, 15 seconds won't actually be enough time to allow people to feel something deeply. We'll get kind of like a nice idea, and that's all we need. This man was brought to tears within like 3 seconds. And he was talking about how it reminded him of his family members and people who have gone ahead. And it was like this very salient, direct impact that this song had. 15 seconds. That created this instantaneous emotional response in him where I was like, wow, this is very validating. Like, this is something that I knew existed, but to see it with my own eyes in the context of the study, not influencing anything is just, validating. So cool. Because even as you're saying that, there's some songs that are going through my head, right? And that's just so interesting. Like, tell me more about what you've learned about the relationship about music and your well-being. Like, what is the goal? Like, if you were obviously you're in the middle of your study, but like, if you were to use music to support someone, how would you do that? Yeah, I would say what I love about music is it's so easy to administer. You can play music anywhere at any time. Well, most places. The people who are playing it on blast in the middle of the bus without headphones, those people maybe put some headphones in. But really, it's like something that you can be exposed to anywhere. It's not a surgery. It's not a pill. It's so easy to administer. It's like, why not try it out? How would you describe this approach? Like, it's a non-invasive approach? Like, what is it? It's a non-invasive approach. Okay. It's super non-invasive. Yeah. And it's a naturalistic type of stimulus, right? And so what I would encourage, and what I do encourage, even with like my own grandparents when I can, my grandpa has Alzheimer's disease. When I visit him, and when we see each other, I say, like, Lolo, do you remember this story or this song, Bahay Kubo, which is like a song in Tagalog that he used to sing when he was a kid. And so by kind of prompting that, he'll start singing the song and he'll maybe fumble the words here and there, but there are a lot of things that he doesn't remember anymore. He's in his later stages of Alzheimer's, and he remembers that song. There are a lot of songs that we didn't know he even knew, and we started singing like first couple of lines, and then he started singing the rest of it. It's just a power. Like, you don't know what associations people have made with these with songs or with sounds, and it's like, why not try to unlock that kind of thing? And the thing that was one of the first phenomena that I really latched onto with music was memory. Was that music is such a salient connector to our memory and our emotions that there must be something there. Like, we can use music to unlock memories that have maybe been lost in the past, or we can use music in a proactive way to help people hold on to memories. What is your take on, so this might be like a niche thing, but a lot of people in spiritual communities will say like, oh, I'm not going to listen to certain musics because
music, Sophob. I'm not going to listen to certain music because of what they're saying and the rhythmic nature of it, and that it's imprinting in my brain and all this stuff. So they'll like specifically only listen to like gospel or stuff like that. What is your take on that?
I mean, I think to each their own. I think what's interesting is I think that those types of people are acknowledging implicitly that music is a really powerful medium. That, music can be used to change your emotional state, or can actually help you believe. Like we have music that's very meditative. We have music that's like an anthem that are anthem-like. And so if you kind of continue to engage with those types of that type of music, then there is something to say that like it might transform the way that you think and say, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. But I think for those types of people who are like, well, we can't listen to this type of music, we have to listen to this type of music because of our beliefs or because of it doesn't align, or it's just something that's displeasing in our culture. I think that they are admitting that music is such a powerful medium that it can change your emotional and affective state. I think it's really interesting. I didn't grow up listening to obviously like heavy metal music, but when I'm at the gym, I use it as I utilize music as like a functional tool. I don't necessarily I'm not going to be like on my day off drinking like a matcha latte and then listening to screamo in my ears to like calm down. But when I'm at the gym and trying to go for a PR, that's all I'm listening to, right? Yeah. Like we can use music as a functional tool, which I think it's kind of what that's getting at is music is powerful in that sense. We can use it to transform our states or to actually do certain things that we might not be in the current state to do. So I think it is like very powerful in that sense. And, again, to each their own. People listen to whatever they listen to.
Yeah. And they deserve that. They deserve that anonymity to be, not anonymity. They deserve that autonomy over what they put in their ears and their minds and their hearts. So many things I could ask right now. It's like too many curiosities. You know
you
this.
Want to do your PhD? Because it sounds like the questions turning into other questions is kind of like the whole thing.
Oh my gosh. When you came, you did your interview and, you shared a lot of information with us. And there's some things that I could definitely ask you in this podcast, but a lot of those questions are answered in the series. And so if anyone wants to listen to that, they can go and watch the series on CBC's Creator Network. But I'm really curious for you because I find that like when you're in a conversation, then, you're driving home or you're driving wherever you're going after that, there's curiosities or there's clarities that pop up for you yourself, right? What came up for you after that experience of doing that interview and just really reflecting on the relationship between the brain, the nervous system, the mind, and music?
I think the aha moments they happen kind of every day. After the particular interview, I would say like the aha moment or I guess just like a grounding realization was that this again was something that was of interest enough to pursue in this format. I have seen things about music and the brain, music and science throughout my years, and I've always craved those types of media because it validated that what I had always known and what I know every musician that I know or just people that I know who love music, what we all know to be true. And so to come out of that space and to have neuroscientists, to have audio engineers, to have someone like me in the middle to bridge those conversations, to have those conversations, it validated in my mind that it is something that's worth talking about. One of my missions when I was earlier on in my academic career was to start the Brain and Music group, student group at UBC, because I knew that there were a lot of people like me, students like me, who were interested in this intersection, but there was no space. There's not a lot of spaces in Western Canada, actually, that really talk about music and the brain in the way that we've been talking about it, which is why I'm like, it was kind of like a desert for such a long time. I was just craving this type of thing. Yeah. So much great work that's being done on the East Coast, and in the States and in Europe. Yeah. But on the West Coast, I'm like, I'm here, we're here, let's talk about it.
Yeah, this project took me 4 years to get anybody really interested in.
Totally. So it's really nice to see institutions and Dr. Sarah Faber, who you guys got.
Cool. Yeah.
Dr. Sarah Faber, who you guys got for these conversations, really kind of pulled us together, and seeing this representation on the West Coast. So yeah, that was a big realization.
If you were to encourage somebody on the other side, like, hey, like these are some things I want you to focus on or think about when you think about music and how you can utilize music, or just anything when it comes to these realizations that you've already integrated into your real life. What are 2 or 3 things that you can offer to the audience?
Well, this might be counterintuitive because my brain went somewhere else again. One of my mentors, Dr. Psyche Louie, who is from Vancouver but is actually doing her research at Northeastern University in Boston. A lot of her research actually centers around this idea or this condition called musical anhedonia, which is essentially people who actually derive no pleasure from music.
Interesting.
So it's actually like this medical, this kind of situation where people actually don't feel anything toward music. They actually they feel no pleasure toward it. They don't feel no joy or motivation. So I think that, the first thing that I would say is, as someone who's really biased toward music and really loves music, I do have to acknowledge that music is not for everyone. Biologically speaking, right? Like some people really will react to other types of reward, like money and food in a normal way, but just music is not something that they enjoy. I will also say that music might have a negative connotation for some people, some certain pieces of music or certain things that happen with music. So I would say, if I was talking to someone about like introducing them to music and the brain, it's a really powerful tool in either direction. We can use music and utilize music as a tool in a positive way to help ourselves, again, regulate, help ourselves go from a state that we don't want to be in to a state that we do want to be in. But we can also do the opposite. Like we can sink and ruminate in our emotional states by listening to music that feeds that certain thing as well. So I think we have to be careful with our listening practices as well, and realize that, like, again, it's not a one size fits all. Some people don't like music. Some people love music. Some people are like hyper emotional and hyper responsive to music. But it's all, again, about this particular tweaking of our own systems. We need to really know ourselves. Will interacting with music actually bring me to a state that's ideal, or will it actually, bring me to a state that's even worse than when I started? If we're in a bad mood and we're listening to angry music in the car, will that actually clear our mind, or will that actually get us pissed off on the road and get us into an accident?
Just perpetuate things.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
so
that part of like, do I know myself? That's where all my work is, like the center of all my work is how can we know ourselves better so that we can inform our worlds better. Yeah.
Totally.
All right, Mikey, where can people find you online?
Mikey Jose, at Mikey Jose on Instagram. Anywhere you can find me, MikeyJose.com is my website. Yeah.
You crushed it. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.